Hello, friends, and welcome to the City of the Immaculata, a channel where we discuss various topics of history and theology. We are continuing our journey with Bonaventure, looking at Bonaventure's mysticism, and today we will be considering God through goodness. If you are watching this on YouTube, I would ask that you like the video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Some points to consider. In the previous lecture, we discussed how Bonaventure makes an allusion to the cherubim on the ark. We've gone from the outer sanctuary of the temple to the inner sanctuary, and we've entered into the Holy of Holies where we've gazed upon the first cherubim. And the first cherubim, Bonaventure likens to God's essential attributes, in particular the attribute of being. Here in this chapter, Bonaventure is going to turn to the second cherubim to consider the good itself as the principal foundation of contemplating the personal emanations of God, which is going to lead us where in the previous chapter we, through being, considered God and his oneness. Through today, contemplating the personal emanations, we will be considering God in the triune aspects of reality. And there's a strong emphasis in this chapter on Dionysius the Areopagite. There's a certain apophatic element. And when you read this chapter, you will notice that it's significantly more dense and a bit more penetrating. This chapter is a little bit harder. And I want to say that there is, at the beginning, you're dealing with scholastic writing. So that in of itself is something to consider. But beyond that, you're also dealing with a man who's trying to put into scholastic terminology the greatest, the most incomprehensible of all of the mysteries of this mysterious existence that we partake of, which is the triune reality, especially when considered ad intra within the Godhead. So I will do my best here. I have been told once that people that give lectures on theology are given a certain grace, an allowable 3 errors that they could teach within a single lecture. And if I were going to be teaching errors in terminology and words that I use, this would probably be the one. So if you have a high expertise, high levels of precision in your studies of the Trinity, first, I ask that you forgive me if any of my words in this lecture are incorrect. Second, please feel free to comment in the comment section and clarify or reiterate or expound upon certain topics that we're going to be looking at in this particular lecture. I just ask that you do so with your own grace towards me and my flaws. And may, by the power and the gifts of the Holy Spirit, I keep the errors as few as possible. Because again, this is a significant chapter, and it's fairly dense, and penetrating exactly what Bonaventure is getting at is not necessarily an easy task, but I make the best of it here. So the first thing that Bonaventure does is he asks, why triune? Why is there this element of three within the single, purely simple Godhead? And he gives, I think, an interesting beginning. He gives St. Anselm's ontological argument. And the reason that he does this, it may seem slightly out of place, but the reason that he does this is because within Anselm's argument, there's an idea, there's a notion that for something to be the greatest of all goods, that it's better that that thing would exist in reality rather than just in the mind. So Bonaventure takes that kernel of an idea and then it states that this necessary being must be triune because if it is a perfection to love, it must be relational by the sheer definition of what love is, meaning therefore that it is greater, that the love of this perfect being is shared rather than vacuous. But in order for this to terminate in the Trinity, the love must be shared among something equal as actual, intrinsic, substantial, and hypostatic, etc. If this were simply the love that God has maybe when he looks upon creation, or in reverse, when creation gazes upon God, there's a clear differential there that would not make creation capable of being within this category of the most perfect kind of love. Otherwise, creation would collapse into a certain immanence where basically you end up with a pantheism. So, in order to have that in the Anselmian ontological sense, perfect love, it must be a love equal to the love that exists intrinsically within the Godhead. And so it finds its source in the Father who begets and spirates with persons consubstantial to himself. To be the highest good, this sharing of love must be greater than the love created things share in, as we said. Now, one of the things that I love about this chapter is that as Bonaventure is walking you through it, he likens it to one's eyes moving upwards and upwards and upwards. So he says then that if the mind is capable of beholding this greatest good, that which is greater than any other good, it will see then that a love that is a perfect diffusion, that terminates in a word in which all things are expressed, and also will terminate in a gift in which all things are given. Once the Father speaks the word, and the word returns to the Father, the love that emanates from the Father, that shared love as a gift. Bonaventure says that because of this communicability, we therefore have a consubstantiality. And because of the consubstantiality, we have a likeness in nature. Because of a likeness in nature, there is therefore a co-equality, a co-eternity, and an intimacy, which we would have to have a completely different lecture on. The intimacy between these persons, we would call this circumcision, also known as perichoresis in Greek. This is the study of the relations and the between the three persons of the Blessed Trinity. Bonaventure says that there's complete indivision of substance, power, and activity within this intimacy. And then he asks us to raise our eyes further. Now, this is once again one of my attempts to sort of illustrate what I think Bonaventure is saying here. But the idea is that because of this communicability between the essence, the one essence, because there is a communicability capable, we end up with the persons. But because these persons are consubstantial and person is incommunicable, you end up with hypostases. Each hypostasis has an identity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, therefore it has a personality. Each identity is co-equal, therefore there's a perfect ordering. Co-eternal, therefore there's an emanation that takes place When we say the Son is begotten or that the Spirit spirates, we must understand these in a eternal sense. And then, of course, there is the mutual intimacy, which terminates in the emanations of a person's. So going backwards, Bonaventure says that this supreme communication and true diffusion therefore leads us to true origins and distinction. And while the whole of the essence is communicated, it is given completely. It is distinguished by properties that are of one essence. And the plurality of properties therefore lead to the hypostases. The hypostases is how we are able to discuss the emanation of order and origin, begotten, spirating, while keeping in mind that these are all of one substance, a oneness of substance, which means a oneness of essence, form, dignity, eternity, existence, and infinity. So the cherubim are facing each other. If you are facing the first cherubim, you are the second cherubim. And the second cherubim, as it faces the first cherubim, will be facing the essential attributes of God as being, first and last, eternal, yet most present, most simple, yet without limit, everywhere and nowhere contained. And when this cherubim faces upon this attribute of being, it is able to gaze upon the mercy seat, where God joined to man, born of the Virgin, giving us therefore the God-man, singular God-man. Yet if you're the first cherubim, you are facing the second cherubim, that which is proper to persons. Communicability coexists with a personal identity, a consubstantiality with plurality, so on. So because of this, it gazes upon the mercy seat seen through Christ in his humanity, how Christ coexists with the eternal trinity of substances and with the duality of nature. So we consider Christ as the God-man, the one divine person, yet we also consider Christ of his two natures, divine and human. So Bonaventure is clear that you don't get to this intimacy of knowledge of the Trinity without contemplating Christ. And it's kind of fitting that it's in considering God as triune that Bonaventure places the mind closest to contemplative thought, to the highest form, because he wants to say that it is directly through what Christ has taught us that we are able to penetrate, in so much as we are able to, these truths which lead to a certain awe and illumination of the mind. We wouldn't get there without Christ. So because of Christ, we are able to get there. We are able to consider something like the Trinity. Therefore, we are able to get closest as we most possibly could in this lifetime as sojourners to true contemplative thought. So Bonaventure says, "For if an image is an expressed likeness, then when our mind contemplates Christ, the Son of God, who is by nature the image of the invisible God, our humanity so wonderfully exalted, so ineffably united, and when at the same time it sees united the first and the last, the book written within and without, it has already reached something that is perfect. And now nothing further remains but the day of rest, on which through transports of the mind, the penetrating power of the human mind rests from all the work it has done." So if there's a lesson to be gathered here, it is the Christocentric aspects of Bonaventure and the Franciscan order, all things through Christ. Christ is our gateway. He's the doorway, going back to the very beginning of these lectures. And in the next lecture, we will be considering rest, the final stage of all of this. One of, I think, the most amazing, beautiful chapters written in all of theology. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you like these videos, please like and subscribe. I will see you next time. God bless.